Alright, welcome back. Today I have a very exciting game for you. KG, who's a very young Chinese professional, he's only 17 right now. He just won his first international tournament, the Beiling Cup, and this is very exciting because I believe that this comes with an automatic promotion to 9 Dan. So KG is now going to be a 9 Dan pro at the age of 17, which is pretty exciting. And this was a best of 5 series, and this is the 5th game. I wanted to go over the one that he actually won. So he's, like I said, he's 17, and it's really neat to see such a talented, strong player so young. And I think we'll see KG doing very well over the next decade or so, I would expect, because he has a very interesting style. He kind of creates his own situations, and there's always a lot of weird exchanges and creative play in his games. So let's get into it. KG is white, and he's playing against a 9 Dan pro Qiu Jun. And basically starting off, this I thought was an interesting, I've seen this sporadically in professional play. You know, this is based off of what's called the micro Chinese, which is if white backs off from this approach, black will come back and play this, creating a framework on the bottom. And the mini Chinese is based off of this, large extension from the Chinese shape. But, some pros have experimented with this kind of, I believe this came out of Korea in the last decade. People started experimenting with sliding the stone one space over, which creates a tighter situation in the corner. We can see now that trying to come in at A or B, not B, A or B is going to be really difficult for white. But recently we've seen some pros just starting, instead of playing the approach first, just making this tighter extension along the side. It's an interesting idea, so you might want to experiment with that yourself. White comes on the inside to prevent any large-scale framework from developing. Black pincers, which is good with this. These two stones project influence this way, so that's why black, captures here. And here black's going to take a framework on the side anyway, giving white the corner. And then the neat thing, when you have this close pincer, if the black stone at A were further away, the white stone at B would have more aji. And just to look at that aji real quick, you can see that, if black, approaches here now, which is what happens in the game, white can descend here to threaten to connect underneath, and black can either descend solidly or hane here, and then white could jump out. But with the black stones so close, this aji is not as interesting as if, we were looking at a situation where this stone was, say, here. Now there's more room for the white stone to maneuver. So usually, sometimes in this joseki, we'll see black playing the hane here instead of somewhere else, like the B stone, to remove all of that aji and just kind of consolidate the side. But we can see with the position in game, a hane at A would be very small for black. So black's just going to go ahead and approach down on the side. And now we just this is like black played the micro Chinese anyway, so white didn't get a chance to disrupt that. And a lot of times what happens is if you start with the approach these days, a lot of players will pincer you to prevent the mini or micro Chinese. So maybe the idea is here is that if we play this sort of extension first, it's not really worth a white move to just make a, enclosure or something just to prevent that. So maybe it's easier to transpose back into the micro Chinese if you play this extension first instead of the approach. Just an idea. It's interesting to see. And black plays on a very large scale, sort of you can see this coordinating with the, everything on the board right now is sort of building up this area. So white comes in, from the outside. And this is one idea. You could also consider coming one line further back. You'd still have room for a two-space extension. The attachment at A is an option pretty much no matter what. You could come a little higher maybe, but this is an interesting move. And black responds fairly aggressively, kind of, looking to lean in and seal. White attaches. And black plays this really aggressive variation. This is kind of, normally we would think, okay, well, white's going to get something on the side. I'll take the corner, build up the bottom. But here black is kind of like pushing really hard, and we get into this really complicated corner situation. We can see it's just like, wow, how is this going to get resolved? And it basically, we can see here that, white's taking the corner, although this is not a completely living shape in the corner either. If black gets out here, you can see white still needs to make two eyes at this point. So white's not alive in the corner. Of course, this is an Atari, so it could be feasible to make another eye over here, but it's also possible... Well, yeah, maybe, yeah, white can make an eye on the bottom too, so... or white does that right now, to ensure that the corner is alive, which is good. And then we can see white's trying to make a position on the outside as well, and this actually, by the time all is said and done, works out pretty well. This is a neat Tsuji here, because you see when white descends, black has a shortage of liberties and can't Atari at A or B, which allows white to capture the C stones, which means white's going to be connected to the outside in addition to taking the corner territory. In return, black did get sort of positions on both sides, but this seems good for white to me, mostly because white's not sealed in, and that means that essentially this big black framework has been broken, and black didn't really get very much for it. Black lost the corner, is not getting really any territory down here. You can see all these moves to just capture this one stone are not very efficient in this area, so I think this is pretty good. Black does get Sente though, so it goes to take the corner. And kind of surprised that there's kind of a few more moves over here, but they'll return to them in a bit. And this I was really surprised by. For whatever reason, this would just not have occurred to me. I would have just separated, when black jumps in, I would think, okay, well if I block here, that's going to be really small, and then I have to make a gote extension that's just really slow, so I'm just going to instead block here, and then, take my compensation from later being able to, like, invade here. Give black the corner and look to damage the lower side instead. But white has an interesting idea, and I guess, this is, white's choice in the game does do more to coordinate, because now you can see this extension is also an extension from this stone over here. So it's just interesting because I just wouldn't have thought of this. This looks slow to me, but when one of the strongest professionals in the world plays it, you have to kind of reevaluate your own thinking a little bit about the game. And here we see a very interesting... If you've been following my videos, you know this Joseki, and you know that this is a really delicate point because black is not yet alive in the corner. Black needs this move to be alive in the corner. And so the question is, can black push and cut? Because if white could just ignore this cut and push in here, this black corner is dead now. So essentially what black has to be sure of is that something like this is definitely going to be working, or is going to give enough compensation, because it's like, well, maybe white can force out this way, but now if this attack is decisive and we capture these 3 stones, then we rescue the corner, essentially. So it's a really, kind of... And this is, if this cut is working for black, then white can't block entirely here. White would have to, at this point, simply, do something to press down, or even just, at this point, could Tanuki away from the corner to either grip this stone or do something like this, and then black would probably come out like this. But in the game, white blocks here, and then we get into, having to look at this cut. So, black activates the Aji of the outside stone first, and you can see here white turns here, and then, was there a ladder? Oh, there is a ladder with these white stones here, so black actually comes back, because if white comes out here, we get a ladder coming from here, and essentially black doesn't want white to be able to play a ladder breaker later in this fight. So black just captures back over here, which gives white the, which is actually Sente, because now that black can Atari here, in order to keep these stones connected, white has to play Atari here. So this is good timing to get rid of this ladder potential in Sente before anything too crazy happens. And now black comes through, as we were talking about, cuts, and here, you know, it's kind of obvious that, you know, if white does this, this is going to be real problematic because, you know, there's a real shortage of liberties for these white stones now, and the shape is just really ugly. That's always a good clue. If you end up with like this weird dumpling shape mostly surrounded by your opponent's stones, you might want to reject that variation. So, white has to extend here, and now we're going to get into a very tricky fight. So here, black's threatening, white's offering an exchange here, because black could cut this, but when white might Hane or just descend. Either way, though, it's like black's definitely not 100% alive, because there's only one eye for sure in the corner now, and yeah, we're out on this side, so like now we can see black is basically maybe going to get a point in the corner and definitely out here, but you know, losing these 4 stones is pretty big, and like this doesn't, black just looks really low because black had to connect on the first line in this variation, which is, you know, that's obviously not, generally speaking, going to be a Joseki. So it pushes in, and black blocks here, and again, if white gets a follow-up, white can kill the corner, but white decides, okay, now that I can't capture these stones, I don't want black to connect to the outside here either. And now black is going to, you know, come out with these stones and threaten on the side. So white has to respond, which gives black impetus to kind of come back and attack the A group here. This is, you know, black's idea is that as long as the A group is fairly short of liberties, white doesn't have time to kill the corner. And we're going to see it's a very knife-edge play here, because we can see white does Hane here, and black responds, and this response gives black the most liberties on the inside, because we can see right now white can reduce this to a dead shape just by pushing here, and then we can see this is the 5-point oversized eye. Yeah, you know, black do this. The problem is that black has so many liberties. You know, it's going to be many moves to actually capture these black stones. And right now, if black has Sente, you know, and black just does, you know, maybe you could even just block like this, because if, you know, white tries to kill this, that's Atari, that's dead. You know, white just doesn't have the liberties on the outside to kill this right now. So it's really interesting that, you know, this is not a living shape yet, but white has to resolve the issues on the outside before white can try to come back and kill the corner. So you can see here, white comes out, black Hanes, and black is going to try and keep these liberties super tight. This is all pretty clever, the way black handles this. Cutting here, threatening to, and we can see here how quickly, you know, if white leaves this at any point in this sequence to come back and do something like this, it's Atari, that's Atari. You know, white just dies. So black is really putting a lot of pressure on the white stones here. White comes down, and we can see here that it's kind of a similar situation. White also has an oversized eye shape. So black comes here, and now white has to come back and capture this one black stone. And black then comes back and lives. And I'll show you, even at this point, if white tries to do this, we would see this. And now, if black comes out with the stone, this white group will actually die before the black group, because we kind of have similar oversized eyes. But black has already started filling several stones, and plus this little escape hatch over here, this false eye, gives black another couple of liberties. So we can just see that, you know, one thing that white might try here is to do this, which makes black capture these two stones first before before this Atari. So let's say, you know, that's what we do. We come from the outside. White has to start reducing. Black captures here. White's reducing. This is Atari, and then this is Atari too. And we go back in, and we can see that, you know, black is just well ahead in the capturing race here. So, you know, black still has several liberties. White can start, but this is Atari, so, you know, we can see that, let's see, 1, 2, capture, 3. Yeah, black has like 3 more liberties than white, so this isn't even a close capturing race. So going all the way back, I just wanted to show that, you know, this move is necessary, which gives black time to go back and live now. And we can see now that, you know, these 2 points are mi easily for 2 eyes. So, so it's just like, you know, it's like, when do you ever see this type of result where, you know, white ends up capturing some stones over here, and black gets these stones in the center, and black barely lives in the corner? Like, I've never seen anything that, like, really reminds me of this result from this Joseki, so this is just why it's really fun to watch KG games. So anyway, you notice white came up here. This is really big, because if white, you know, does something else, and black covers here, you can see that, you know, this is looking good. Like, we've got basically 3 coordinating walls, and it's going to be hard to, you know, even getting this as territory would be really big in here. So white has to, you know, white has to break the relationship between the center left and the right side, and this is the time, this is the move to do it. But then black just expands the bottom. It's the biggest area of the board, so it's like, black's like, well, yeah, I'll build a framework here. And then I love this because KG's just like, no, no, you won't. Comes right in with this really severe attachment. And, you know, it's just, this is actually really, you know, probably more of just a probing sequence, but it's just funny. It's just like, as soon as black sets up the framework, KG's just attaches right on inside. And then this is interesting as well, because basically through the sequence, white takes 2 more stones, which doesn't seem super big, but you know, it would have been really great for black to have gotten the time to just play this net right here and solidly capture this white stone, because now, you know, this center is so thick. There's not going to be many prospects for white. When white comes out with this 1 stone, black peeps over here and white resists. And now you can see, like, oh, man, maybe this black shape is really thin. But black comes on top, plays the shape moves, white comes back, black Ataris, so white captures. And, you know, again, you know, the 2 stones in and of itself isn't too big, but there's a follow-up at A to get some more territory, and there's also the cutting points at B and C. And since there's 2 cutting points, it's obvious that black isn't going to be able to protect both here. So white continues to follow up against the right. This is kind of a typical idea, as if your opponent doesn't respond to one of your moves, a good candidate is to follow it up and really punish them for not responding to your move. Here, black pulls the 1 stone out, white attaches. You know, this is really, you know, some high-level stuff, because, you know, white's trying to keep potential weaknesses in the center exploitable later. So this is why he's attaching over here, is to kind of break up the connection between the center and the bottom. Black pushes, saying, oh, you know, you didn't actually connect against my peep, so I'm gonna cause some damage now. And then comes back to Atari here. White finally follows up down here. Crosscuts. Lots of complications. Comes back to grip the 1 stone. Black is, you know, kind of making a little bit in here. You know, it's getting later in the game. Oh, and then black comes back to cut here. So we get into some more infighting on the top. And you can see here, after white gets these 3 stones, this cut is becoming very severe to take a lot of territory on the top. So black has to come back and protect. But that lets white Hane at the head of 3 stones, and especially with this cut, there's just a real shortage of liberties problem, which makes forces black into this really ugly shape where he's using 2 empty triangles to capture 1 stone. It's really sad, but black peeps down here and is trying to break up this lower, or not lower, upper side territory here, you know, the on the top, and as well as defend as much as possible. And again, we're getting into a situation white's eyeing the cut that I mentioned earlier with this advancing move, but now, you know, it's like, well, what about that other cut? Black has to, well, this is really complicated because we can see that there's this capturing race between the A and the B group, but white has it well in hand. It's not actually something to be concerned about, but it does allow, and black knows this too, but this Aji here allows black to make this invasion, and white can't play at A because this move actually helps this group enough at B that B will capture C instead of the other way around. So this is good endgame because, you know, white blocks here, and now black takes a big chunk out of white's territory on the side, which is pretty cool. So yeah, neat sequence all around. White gets the opportunity. After this, black protects here, and then gets the opportunity to kind of close off the upper side, and black elects to go for a ko here, and this is an epic ko. Basically game deciding. There's not enough territory to be made on the board, and I believe black starts this ko because there's no way to win without it. So we're going to get into this, and both sides just have a ton of ko threats. You know, even just this connecting underneath be, you know, pretty crazy. And so they're just gonna, you know, trade blows for a little while here. Yeah, white threatens to kill the corner again. It's pretty exciting. This Atari is good. And you can see that this gets down real close, but with the Atari here, and just Atari here, black will be captured. So, but black's getting a lot of ko threats out of it. Comes over again, you know, rescuing these 2 stones would be really big. And this is slick, just jamming that wedge in there works pretty well. Comes here, and this is cool. This threatens to capture these 5 stones, starting with the Atari here, and then Atari and capture. And oh yeah, continues threatening over with these stones. I mean, black got like 5, 6, 7 ko threats out of that. It's very impressive. That's an Atari, has to be responded to. That's an Atari, has to be responded to. It's just a lot of... Both players have a ton of ko threats. But we can see here just that black's shape is so bad. It just gives white so many opportunities to force in here. And white recaptures. Black takes here, which is again, you know, we're threatening to capture these stones. So there's the Atari there. This Atari again. Yeah, and here we can see that now there's a the follow-up to play here creates a shortage of liberties where white can't Atari at this point anymore. So white's going to have to start this ko to capture these stones, which would be really annoying. So white just makes an I instead of you know, getting into that variation, because now we can see that black can never approach here because black will never have the liberties, because black can never get an I in here. So this resolves this situation so that, you know, there's no more threats here for black. I guess connecting underneath would still be a threat to rescue the stones, but because if these stones are connected back out, then yes, this move could eventually be played. But that's not the game. The game, white continues just using these Ataris against this big dragon over here, which is a pretty good way to go. And again, alright, yeah, here we see black is threatening to connect, which would not be okay. So, one more Atari, and now you can finally see that, I mean, you know, yeah, black got a lot of ko threats out of these black stones, but, I mean, just all of this is really painful. Really painful for black to have to answer in these ways. And now this is a neat idea. Now that you know these stones are going to be captured, you can actually self-Atari to Atari your opponent as a co-threat, because you know these stones are coming off the board at the end of the game anyway. So, neat idea by black there to get another co-threat out of the stones. Again, we can see white's threatening to connect on the bottom, and you know, it's just like black has to get this to a point where white's only making like 2 or 3 points of territory. So, and again, just continuing here. This is a neat sequence here to do the Ataris inside, forcing white to capture. And coming here, and again, now this is basically where black throws in the towel and says, yeah, I can't win this ko, because here, when white comes here, if black retakes the ko, white can just cut. And now it doesn't matter about the ko. Well, I guess black could play here, white would just play here, but these are still not eyes. Black only has one eye at the edge of the board in this variation, and can't even, this isn't even starting a ko, white would just connect. And we can see here, false eye, false eye, false eye. There's just the 1 at L18, so this group would just die. So that's no good. So black has to connect here, but this is obviously not really a co-threat. Like, this is only a threat, I guess, to capture these 2 white stones. So white just takes the ko. And basically, more or less, like, seals the game at this point. You know, jumps out, makes sure that black isn't going to get too much in the center. You know, if white did something really small instead of this jump and black got to make this jump, you can see how much that would be expanding black's center territory at this point. Black defends what he can, trying to hang in there, but basically at this point, this is where black resigns and says, you got me, you're good. There's just no way for black to make any more territory on this board. It's very small endgame at this point. So basically, with this ko went the game, and KG won it. And yeah, this game is kind of a little bit more difficult. I usually try to pick games that have slightly more understandable things, but I was so excited that KG won an international tournament against a bunch of really good players. And like I said, he's only 17, going to be probably doing very well, you know, for like the next several years as one of the young rising stars of the Chinese Go world. And you know, one thing to say is, you know, it's like Li Chengho really dominated for a long time when he was similarly young, but you don't quite see players emerging with such total dominance. I think just the overall level of play has risen in the last, you know, decade or two, and it's really hard for a player to come out and completely dominate, because just there's so many good players in all the countries, but particularly in China and Korea. It seems like there's just a ton of really strong, really young players. I think I showed I showed a game a few weeks ago between KG and a new pro, Shin Jin-seo, who's only like 13, like 12 or 13, and Shin Jin-seo won that game. So it's just kind of like, whoa, this is crazy, but super exciting nonetheless. Congratulations to KG, and also, like I said, I believe that winning an international tournament is an automatic promotion to 9 Dan in China, so I'll keep an eye out, and we'll see if KG has a 9 instead of a 4 next to that little P symbol next time we check out one of his games. And that will do it for this time. Thank you for watching.